above the barriers and build wealth with a cooperative model session today. Let me see if I can click here. Okay. Denver Startup Week is dedicated to providing a harassment-free conference experience for everyone. A quick look at our agenda to guide the conversation today. We will be providing brief overviews of these topics, and then we'll go to a question and answer. The goal of this session is to first provide you with information regarding democratized ownership and worker-owned cooperatives, as we believe this is one of the ways to create an inclusive and sustainable economy with the values of self-help, participation, social responsibility, and democratic accountability. Secondly, we want to make sure that we answer any burning questions that you may have about the model. Quickly, my name is Carla Castedo Rivero, and I work with the Denver Economic Development and Opportunity, or DEDO for short. And DEDO works to ensure an inclusive and innovative economy for all Denver residents, business, and neighborhoods. And I will get to introducing you all to our panelists. So let me first introduce you to Amy Barres. Amy Barres is the Executive Director of the Rocky Mountain Employee Ownership Center, where she works with business owners, exploring the range of employee ownership, options from co-ops to ESOPs and everything in between. Prior to joining RMEOC in 2019, Amy began her journey into employee ownership, working with startup worker-owned cooperatives in the Denver metro area in 2014. And she served as the Assistant Director of the Urban Cooperative Center of the Rocky Mountain Farmers Union from 2014 to 2017. She was a 2015 National Fellow in Cooperative Development with the Democracy at Work Institute, focused on racial justice and scaling the cooperative movement. Amy brings a wealth of experience to the employee ownership field, from her background in community organizing with diverse communities and building organizational capacity for strategic thinking and action to achieve a more just and inclusive economy and society. Amy holds both bachelor and master's degree in social work from Albright College and the University of Maryland, Baltimore, and an MA in international development, specializing in gender equity and economic development from the University of Denver. She is a native of Pennsylvania, but has called Denver her home since 1999. Thank you so much, Amy, for being here today. Our next panelist, Jessica Citlay Olguin, is the Executive Director of the Center for Community Wealth Building, an organization that promotes strategies for a sustainable economy and works to transform the current economic development system to a more inclusive and equitable model that prioritizes democratically owned businesses. It emphasizes local procurement, and it ensures social, environmental, and institutional sustainability. Prior to Center for Community Wealth Building, Jessica was the country director of Project Gettysburg Leon, an international sister city organization that works to empower Nicaraguans to be leaders of their own development. Jessica served the United States of America as a small business development specialist in the city of Esteli in northern Nicaragua through the Peace Corps. And she grew up in the Swansea neighborhood in Denver. Jessica has done grassroots community organizing with immigrant groups and low-income communities across the Denver metro area since the year 2000. Thanks so much, Jessica, for bringing your international knowledge to this panel too. And representing us at the city, we have Silvia Smith, who is the Assistant Director for Neighborhoods. Silvia has enjoyed a career with the City and County of Denver since 1988. During her tenure, she has served in a variety of capacities, from Director of Policy and Research under former City Auditor Donald J. Mares to her current position as Assistant Director for the Denver Economic Development and Opportunity Neighborhoods Division, managing HUD's Community Development Block Grants. A graduate of Thomas Jefferson High School in Denver, Silvia holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Political Science from the University of Colorado at Denver. Silvia has been an active member in many organizations. She has volunteered numerous hours to various community, social, and political events. And in her work capacity, she has been active with the Holly Area Redevelopment Project in Northeast Denver, served as a board member for the Asian Chamber of Commerce, and was appointed to the Asian Pacific American Commission. Currently, she serves as the employee representative to the Denver Board of Ethics. And from 2002 through 2006, she served on the steering committee of the Denver Foundation's Expanding Nonprofit Inclusiveness Initiative project, which studied the local nonprofit community and their inclusiveness practices specific to people of color. Silvia currently resides in Denver with her husband, Derek, and enjoys spending time volunteering, exercising, enjoying the company of her family and friends, and going to movies and traveling. And her favorite quote, and this describes Silvia to the T, is service is the rent that you pay for room on this earth. So thank you so much, Silvia, for being here as well. And now we'd like to hear from you, who's in the audience. In the chat, please go ahead and introduce yourselves with your name, your preferred pronouns, why you chose this session, anything you're hoping to get clarity on. And throughout the session, please go ahead and use this Q&A feature to ask any questions within our time together. And Amy, I will pass the next section to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Carla. Hi, everyone. My name is Amy. And as Carla said, I'm the executive director of the Rocky Mountain Employee Ownership Center, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. So glad to be with you today and with my other panelists. So we're going to be talking today about worker ownership or employee ownership. And we want to start with really just defining what that is. So when we talk about employee ownership, we're talking about a proven business concept that really dates in this country back to the 1800s, where there was a lot of growth during the Industrial Revolution of employee-owned businesses and worker-owned cooperatives. And employee ownership is really just essentially a business that is owned by a broad base of its employees, and where the employees own a financial share in the company. And when we talk about a broad base of employees, we're really talking about either all of the employees in a company or the majority of employees are financial owners, or they have the opportunity to become owners in the future. So there are many types of employee-owned business models, and two that you may have heard of because they really are the most prevalent are worker-owned cooperatives and employee stock ownership plans, or ESOPs. There are about, at this point, 500 or so worker-owned cooperatives in the United States. There are about 6,500 ESOPs, and those represent thousands and thousands of employee owners across the country. We're going to be mostly focusing on worker-owned cooperatives today, so we'll be going much more deeply into that model. But just to give you a little bit of overview of some of these different types. Worker-owned cooperatives are a very democratic model of employee ownership, and they're appropriate for a business that can be very small. 3 employees is kind of the minimum that you need to form a worker-owned cooperative, and they can go up to very large companies. The largest worker-owned cooperative in the United States, which you saw in the previous slide, some of the worker owners from that cooperative, Cooperative Home Care Associates in the Bronx, actually has over 1,000 worker owners. So co-ops are a very flexible model, and they can be used for really almost any size of business. An employee stock ownership plan is often more appropriate for a business that has at least 50 employees. And is a little bit larger in terms of revenue. So at least we usually say at least 5 to 10 million in annual revenue. And it really is essentially a type of federally regulated retirement plan. There are also employee ownership trusts, which again are a very flexible model for creating a trust that owns the stock of the company and keeps that in perpetuity for the benefit of employees, and can also have other types of membership, such as community membership or consumer membership. Then there are also different ways to create employee ownership within your business using stock options or equity grants, stock purchase plans, or profit sharing. And those are often used by businesses when they're kind of maybe testing the waters and not ready to do a full cooperative yet, maybe not ready to go the ESOP route, but are trying to think about what are some things I could do within my business to start to share profit and or share ownership, financial ownership. And so often business owners will use something like stock options or equity grants or profit sharing as a stepping stone to get to an ESOP or co-op. You can go to the next slide. Yeah. So why is it important that we're talking about employee ownership now? Well, some things that we know about worker ownership and employee ownership is that it can be a really good solution, especially in times of economic crisis. What we saw after the last economic crisis with the 2008 crash and the following recession was that the number of worker co-ops in the US actually doubled. And that was especially true for immigrant-led cooperatives and cooperatives coming out of BIPOC communities. During this current crisis that we've had with the pandemic, we've seen that both worker co-ops and ESOPs have had better rates of survival than traditional companies, have had fewer layoffs, and have had a lot less financial crisis among their worker owners than workers have suffered in other kinds of businesses. Oops, could you go back actually a second, Carla? I'm just trying to fix my view here. And so employee ownership or models can be used at different times. So no matter where you are now in the life cycle of your business, an employee ownership model could be right for you if you're a startup. Co-ops in particular can be great at the startup phase. It can also be used if your business is struggling and you're looking around and thinking, how can I strengthen my business? Either by bringing on a stronger team or really, really strengthening the team that I have now by sharing ownership and giving people more of a voice in this business. Or it can be used by multiple businesses together to come together through a merger or a collaboration in sharing services and helping to strengthen each other. And then it's also often used if you're thinking about exiting your business, either getting near retirement or exiting for some other reason. And it can be used to keep that business going through a sale to employees that continues the legacy of the business, that helps that business continue on into the future and keeps those jobs in the community. And so really, no matter where you are in your business's life, you can consider employee ownership as a way to, share the benefits with everybody in the workplace during the good times and also the risks and the burdens in the hard times.
Thank you, Amy. Hi, everyone. As Carla mentioned, I'm Jessica Holguin. My pronouns are she, her, ella. I'm the Executive Director of Center for Community Wealth Building. We wanted to present why employee ownership or why a worker cooperative. And we really want to make sure that the point gets across that it just makes business sense. Compared to conventional firms, worker-owned businesses with an ESOP have had higher productivity with increased sales, lower employee turnover and greater longevity, double the retirement savings and better employment opportunities. And so it just, when everyone does better, everyone does better. And I know it sounds a little cliche, but this is the way that our communities can strengthen and that we can actually create an economy that works for everyone. Compared to conventional firms, worker-owned cooperatives have increased employment rates in successful times, as Amy mentioned, and greater resilience during recessions. The lower pay gap within firms, which also creates more pay equity in our communities. And the fact that majority women and non-white owners creates an opportunity for us to utilize the cooperative model as a way to ensure that we close the racial wealth gap. We recognize that in the times when our economy has been strong, we know that our communities of color can continue to struggle. And so we see cooperatives as a way to be able to create an economy that works for everyone. And we are happy to share some of the sources of the presentation that come with this. Next slide, please. And so, as we said, we're going to talk more about worker cooperatives. And in essence, a cooperative is a business that operates for the benefit of its members. That can be workers, producers, consumers, or some combination of all of them. And the way that it works is that each member purchases a member share in the business, which entitles them to a vote. In cooperatives, every member has an equal voice. And so unlike traditional corporations where more shares that are purchased, the more of a voice that individual has, with cooperatives, the contributions of each employee or of each member are equal to one vote. And so this also entitles them to an equal dividend of the profits, and typically in proportion of how much they use the cooperative. As it was mentioned before, there's various types of cooperatives. We have worker cooperatives, which is mainly what we're focusing on today, but there's also shared services that Amy touched briefly, where various businesses can come together and form a shared services cooperative. We have consumer cooperatives, and those are very, I would say, more mainstream. We have food cooperatives, we have REI as a large consumer cooperative. We have producer cooperatives. Traditionally, these have been very successful in agricultural settings where one producer may not necessarily have enough, may not produce enough to be able to negotiate. But when 10 producers come together, there's enough power there to be able to come together and utilize that power of the collective. There's other types of cooperatives. We have multi-stakeholder cooperatives, now platform cooperatives, housing cooperatives that are solving very specific housing issues, real estate investment, and many, many more. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the cooperative principles, because that's really what I call the cooperative difference. In some ways, the cooperatives are just like any other business. I see that we have Mike in the house from Namaste Solar Cooperative. And just like any other business, Namaste Solar has to compete in the market. But what makes cooperatives very unique is that they are guided by values and principles. Cooperative values are based on the values of self-help, self-responsibility, democracy, equality, equity, and solidarity. And these are the values and principles are recognized worldwide. Some of those principles, as you'll see on the screen, include open and voluntary membership, which in essence means that any member that can abide by the responsibilities can become a member. And so these are, in essence, cooperatives cannot discriminate based on race, sex, gender, orientation, political, religious affiliations. And so it is critical that they remain open to ensure that they can strengthen our communities. The second guiding principle is democratic member control. As it was mentioned before, cooperatives are democratic organizations controlled by their members who actively participate in setting policies and making decisions. And these are typically done either through direct participation or through an elected board. And so we have, there's various types of ways that members can contribute, but at the end of the day, it is critical that their voice is heard throughout the process. The third principle is member economic participation, and this is critical because it's in essence putting that members, the members putting skin in the game, right? Members can contribute equitably to and democratically control the capital of the cooperative. And so part of the capital is set as the common capital of the cooperative. And then the members receive a dividend or however the cooperative structures it to ensure that they are using the goal is autonomy and independence. And my apologies, I just got a message that my internet is unstable. So hoping you all can still get most of the message. Fourth principle is autonomy and independence. Cooperatives are autonomous self-help organizations controlled by their members. If they enter into an agreement with other organizations, including governments, fundraising, or crowdfunding from external sources, they have to do so in terms that it ensures that democratic control stays cooperative, can remain autonomous, and that the members can make the best decisions for the members and for the cooperative. Principle number 5 is one of my favorites, and it's education, training, and information. In essence, cooperatives provide education and training for their members, elected representatives, managers, employees, so that they can contribute effectively to the cooperative. And this is something that is reflected in their budget, ensuring that the cooperative lives through those values. And so it is critical that every member has the information needed to make the best decision on behalf of the cooperatives. The 6th principle, perhaps my favorite, is cooperation among cooperatives. Cooperatives serve their members most by effectively strengthening the cooperative movement and the cooperative ecosystem by working together, because we know that together, the power of the collective can actually have significant effects in our communities. And so cooperatives advocate for each other, they serve as customers, the suppliers for each other, and support wherever possible. I had the honor of working with a cooperative here in Metro Denver, Mujeres Emprendedoras Cooperative, that was starting from immigrant women in the Westwood area. And they've received so much support from other cooperatives, from the Community Language Cooperative, from Walk to Connect Cooperative, because the idea is that when we see more cooperatives, we can create that ecosystem where everyone can thrive. And the 7th principle is concern for community. Cooperatives work for the sustainable development of communities through policies approved by the members. And so this ensures that it's not just about the quick return on investment, but it really is about ensuring that the policies are strengthening our communities and that we are ensuring that everyone can thrive. If we can go to the next slide. So some of those factors that build community wealth that cooperatives incorporate, it really is the shared prosperity. When we are removing that stakeholder that is in essence extracting profit from our communities, we can ensure that shared prosperity stays within our communities. Cooperatives focus on people as a way to ensure that they're taken care of. It is people first. Cooperatives are very affordable to set up, and they also include a very inclusive stakeholder design because they are part of the decision-making process. The cooperatives end up being entities that are serving the members because that's what they were designed to do, and that's what the process was designed to do. They can include 100% of the employees, and they're very affordable to maintain. They are based on democratic governance, which in essence continuing to contribute to the development and refining of the cooperative to ensure that it meets the needs. And it resists privatization. And not that it doesn't happen, but if a cooperative or employee-owned business were to be privatized, in essence, the employees are the ones that have to make that decision or have to buy into that decision, and they are the ones who benefit from that. And ultimately, we see higher retirement benefits of those employees that are participating in employee ownership. Next slide.
Great, thank you all.
And now I will hand it over to Silvia.
And I apologize, my throat seems to be, I'm having to clear my throat a lot this morning, so I do apologize. So again, I'm Silvia Smith, and I'm the Assistant Director here with Neighborhood Equity Stabilization Team, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. So I just want to say good morning and thank you for joining us to enhance your learning on worker-owned cooperatives. By no means am I subject matter expert on this topic. And every time I'm invited to participate with Jessica or Amy, I learn something new each and every time. So I'm thankful for their expertise and leadership in this realm, and hope that you today also will come away with increased knowledge. And definitely, if you have questions or are interested in it, these folks are here to be able to assist you with further information. And of course, we'll have those resources, I believe, at the end of this presentation. Excuse me. It may seem as though that these models are new and innovative from a city perspective, but having been around a lot of presentations, as Carla said, Sylvia's been here for 30 plus years now with the city of Denver. I've been in a lot of presentations and a lot of conversations. And over those years, I know probably, Jessica, I don't know if I said it was maybe 8 years ago, 7 years ago, something like that. We began sort of trying to bring those conversations into the city. And there was a lot of work for many years in this space by a whole lot of other people, other staff members that were within our organization, and of course, those that are on this call today and others that are in the community. The concept, for me personally, felt like it was foreign in many ways and difficult to understand. And definitely, I think, difficult for a lot of decision makers that I was in the room with. But I'm very happy today that those concepts are being embraced. As a little bit of background, I want to give you, back in 2018, prior to the current leadership structure that we have within the city, we had a previous director in 2018 who was recognizing that as everyone was not clearly benefiting from Denver's economy, she had the sole responsibility of sort of determining what this neighborhood equity and stabilization team would be within the city and county of Denver under the umbrella of the Office of Economic Development. And so she went on a listening tour out in the community, bridging relationships and really listening more than anything. And that has been our mantra from that day, is that we listen to community and what their needs are specifically, because they are the ones that know what they need and have the resolutions in some way, the solutions to what they want and need, and how to solve it best in many instances. I'm sorry, I just lost my way here. But she began the listening tour and recognizing that what we were most interested in targeting was what they were needing, and community knows that. So she came away fully aware that what we really needed to do was rethink the strategies and our service programs, and most specifically our investments with the dollars that we have within our agency. And then, of course, with 2020, we were definitely forced to rethink that strategy. But in 2018, when she was out there on this listening tour, the following year, we were able to release what we call our Notice of Funding Availability. It's called the NOFA. And that is basically, it's the HUD's Housing and Urban Development grant funds that we actually release to community annually for a variety of different community services, programs, projects. We released that NOFA in 2019 with a specific focus area in a specific targeted area of focus, which was called Economic Development, Technical Assistance for Cooperative Business Models. And weren't quite sure what we were going to get, but we knew that was a focus area that we wanted to solicit an opportunity for an entity to provide some sort of service for us in that realm. And then voila, Rocky Mountain Employee Ownership stepped forth and proposed a project. So, and that is Amy Barris today on the phone here with you all. But they are in their second year with us, conducting outreach and providing educational workshops to business owners in the low-mod areas that we are most interested in serving. And they're most focused, there's the scope of that project or of their contract is how to convert businesses to the employee ownership model. So I know that today, Jessica and Amy are definitely more an expert to speak to how this concept is being embraced nationally. But I do know that there are at the federal, state, and municipal level, there needs to be more support in that area. And as I end my presentation, as we move forward to creating a more inclusive economy, the reality is that this makes sense, right? It makes business sense. The city recognizes that our society is heard when 46% of Latinos and 35% of African Americans in Metro Denver still make less than the $15 an hour. In order for our economy to continue to grow, we need to ensure an equitable economy, and cooperatives are just one more tool and strategy that the city can implement. So I just want to thank you. There'll be more opportunity to speak further to it with the experts that you have here on the phone or on this call with Jessica and Amy. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you all so much for that. Of course, we wouldn't be doing our job without offering any type of resources. And so I actually would love to have one of you or all of you walk us through some of the resources. As we saw in the previous presentations, there's a lot of support both in the city, in the state, and federal. So would love to share these with our audience today.
Thank you, Carla, and thank you all. Yeah, one of the things that I find most exciting is doing this work in Colorado. It's such an honor to have done this abroad as well, because when I came back, I was like, oh my God, in some ways, some of the concepts are very much the same, and some of the struggles are also very similar. But I would say that I feel very honored to be doing this in Colorado because we have a governor who believes in employee ownership as a model. When I first started talking about employee ownership in 2017, when I came back, people were like, well, does that actually work? And so I would always have to, come up with all of the research and how this is actually not a new model. And so thank you, Namaste Solar, for providing that model to be able to say, yes, it actually works. And it's happening right now. This is not some utopia world. This is right now. And so when at that time, when candidate pool started talking about employee ownership, then it became a real business model. It became validated in essence. And so we now have a state employee, Colorado Employee Ownership Office, where there are many resources. And yeah, I'm in full disclosure, I am a commissioner for the Employee Ownership Office and for the employee ownership. And we want to make sure that we're continuing to grow employee-owned businesses, and we're continuing to grow the network, because we know that this can be a significant source of strength for our entire state. So definitely check out the Colorado Employee Ownership Office, and the link is there. And we'll also share it in the chat. Democracy at Work Institute, one of the national organizations that also has a lot of resources. They have produced white papers, doing a lot of work to also capture the information and being able to share it with others. U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives, this one specifically, again, focusing on worker cooperatives, and they come out with some really good research. They have amazing resources, webinars. If you want to learn more about something specific, they have a wealth of information to be able to just get your feet in the door. So, Amy, would you want to share a little bit about the others?
Yeah, absolutely. And the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives, also, I'll just add, if you are an existing worker cooperative or you become a worker cooperative, it is a really great membership organization that does a lot of work to support members and connect members across the country, as well as doing a lot of advocacy work. And so we are seeing, both at the state and the national level, some really great policies that are coming out of worker ownership that support worker-owned businesses and make it more possible for worker-owned businesses to access capital, to really thrive. And these things help our economy overall and help businesses overall as well. So it's a really powerful movement to be a part of. So some of the other resources on here that you might want to take a look at, the National Center on Employee Ownership, or NCEO, they're a great partner of ours here locally. And they provide all sorts of in-depth resources, particularly on ESOPs, but also on other types of employee ownership, like if you're curious about what phantom stock is, or you're trying to figure out a profit sharing plan. They've got all sorts of resources that compare those different types of mostly non-cooperative or non-co-op, non-worker co-op types of employee ownership. So definitely they're great to check out. And then the Workers to Owners Collaborative is a part of the Democracy at Work Institute, but it's great if you want to look at some case studies. As Silvia mentioned, at RMEOC, we tend to focus on working with existing businesses that are looking to transition to employee ownership, either through a worker co-op conversion, where a co-op is formed and then can buy the business from the current owners, or through the creation of an ESOP or some other sort of stock form in which shares of stock are transferred over to employees from existing owners. And so what the Workers to Owners Collaborative does is it really focuses on businesses that have converted to employee ownership. And so there's tons of really great case studies you can get on there and look, including some Colorado companies on there. And so it's a great place to start if you're looking for those kind of resources. And then, I would just say too, to check out opportunities on the DDO website, on the Denver Economic Development and Opportunity website, to support worker ownership, to look at the opportunities that are on the Colorado Employee Ownership Office website. There are grants and loans to support businesses that want to become employee owned, to help with the costs of doing that. And then for Center for Community Wealth and for RMEOC as well, we've got a wealth of resources on our website. And so you can reach out to us really at any time with any of your questions. And really kind of what we specialize in is working with business owners to explore what the range of options might be and how you make those decisions. Different types of employee ownership are going to be right for different business owners, depending on what your goals are. They're going to be right for your business, depending on how big or how small you are, what your company culture is like. And so we're just all here to really support you in exploring those options and finding what's right for you.
Thank you both. I would also add that both of these great organizations are local organizations, as you have seen. And if you have Facebook, any type of social media, please follow them there. Maybe we can put that on the chat. If you can't do a quick search, we'll put it on the chat for you so that you can see where to follow them on social media. DDO also has a social media, so you can follow us there. And most of the time we do put in quick information for you so that you can see any type of support and information, that may be beneficial for your business. Or if you're thinking about a co-op, right? Let me see. The next slide is about questions. I would definitely encourage you to do a quick photo or screenshot of both this last one. So I'm going to go ahead and go back so that you can do a screenshot of this. And the next one with our panelists' contact information. And I first want to thank you, all three of you, for your immense knowledge on this topic and for making sure that you're working with community on this. And we do have a few questions that I'd like to address first, because these are some of the most popular questions. And again, if anyone on the audience additionally has questions, please put them on the Q&A or on the chat, and we'll get to them as well. So,
and Carla, if I can just mention really quick, I just saw in the chat, someone said, I just registered for the next RMEOC event, which I should mention, that at the last Wednesday of every month, we do an intro to employee ownership session. So it is a chance to take some of the information that we've covered today and go a bit more in depth. So if you leave today feeling like you want more, please do go to our website and register for that every Wednesday, last Wednesday of the month.
Yeah, if I can also add, Center for Community Wealth Building also has workshops, and we focus on groups that are interested in exploring the cooperative business model and perhaps starting a cooperative. And so you can go to our website, communitywealthbuilding.org, and register for our newsletter where you'll get information. We have so many workshops coming up depending on where you're at in the process. So definitely register.
Perfect. Thank you all. Continuing to add to the resources and opportunities that folks can look through. So the first question I have here is there an industry that's better positioned to benefit from the co-op structure? Who would like to answer?
I would say I can take a first stab at it. And so one of the beautiful things about cooperative structures is that it's so flexible that it can pretty much fit any industry. However, I would say that where it's been incredibly successful is in service industries, or where people input is incredibly helpful. And so, as Amy mentioned, home care associates, because they're directly working with people, and the success of the business is dependent on each individual. That's where it makes the most sense. We're seeing a lot of it in the metro area. We have a catering cooperative where, again, the success of the business is dependent on individuals doing their best. We're currently working with a group that is considering a childcare cooperative, a driver's cooperative. And so again, these are all dependent on the individuals. And if you can imagine, my coworker says, nobody washes a rented car, right? A rental. Everybody washes their own car. And so we're in essence creating opportunities for people to own their job, to own what they worked so hard to do. I'm very passionate about this because I have, my mother works at a very big box store, and she's been there for 21 years, and she makes $1 more per hour than the entry-level worker after 21 years of service. And she is the most dedicated person. She was there through the pandemic. She ended up getting sick, and she was still contributing to the profit of this entity. And so I always wonder, what if we were to create something where she can actually benefit and receive some of the profit and dividends? And so I always think about my mother when I think about this opportunity, because this could be a really powerful model to ensure that people like her can actually benefit from what they produce.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that and say that we work with businesses in about every kind of industry that you could imagine. And so employee ownership really spans industries and sectors, and it can be used for any type of business.
Thank you both. The next question that I have, I'm just trying to see if there's any questions on this end. But while I do that,
Can I ask a question?
of course, Silvia, go ahead.
Because I'm telling you, I always learn something with Amy and Jessica. So Jessica, you used a word there that was very interesting to me when you said that it's somewhat validated now. Well, what is that? I mean, why is that? And it's taken so long to sort of grasp and embrace this concept, but validating, especially for communities of color, sometimes it just seems like it's, until it's validated, it gets no traction in some ways and resources behind that. So.
Yeah, it was fascinating because the work in Nicaragua was in essence built on the cooperative model. And so because not one individual necessarily had the resources, so social capital, to be able to start a business, but when 6 people came together and they were able to pull the resources, they were able to create something amazing. And so when I came back and realized that this model is actually a valid model here, and started talking about it, and with economic development professionals, I even connected with a person who worked at that time with SBDC, and they're like, oh, that doesn't really work. I'm like, but it does. And so I think some of the hesitation came from the idea that, it's the managers that know better. It's the very, very, very high paid people that actually make the business work. And so when in reality, what we saw in the 2020 pandemic is that it is the workers, right? It is the frontline workers that are actually making things happen. Without frontline workers, our economy will crumble. And so why not look at ways in which those who are there day in and day out can actually benefit from it? And so I think it's a little bit of just trying to break the mold of how the perception of corporations and what it's perceived as their value here. But it's also recognizing that people are actually assets in our businesses, that people are actually the profit generators. Machines mean nothing without the people to operate them. And so we can have a lot of machines. And yet, if something breaks down, it is still reliant on that worker to make sure that the production continues. And so I would say that it's a little bit easier now. And I think because of the work of so many people to ensure that cooperatives and employee ownership stays at the forefront, that we're starting to see more movement. But it really all, I mean, it helps when municipalities are getting on board, when the governor is getting on board, when now we have Senator Hickenlooper pushing for policy at the federal level. It starts to change the conversation, and it starts to make it seem more doable for those who previously thought that there were barriers. Because don't get me wrong, the barriers are definitely there, especially for entrepreneurs of color. And yes, it is still difficult for cooperatives to access capital. Senator Hickenlooper is working on that, but it's still, the challenges are real. And yet we know that collective power definitely strengthens the business model. And so, and that's what we've seen even with small grassroots groups that are starting cooperatives, because we're in essence building on that social network, building on that collective power to ensure that these businesses can thrive.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, and we're also really seeing, I mentioned early on in our presentation that, we saw a big growth of worker cooperatives across the country after the 2008 economic crash, and then the recession. And I think that we're seeing, 10 plus years later, that so many of these cooperatives have been able to thrive and have been able to grow and have created good jobs and have made a difference for their worker owner members, in terms of not just a better workplace, a more democratic workplace, increasing wages, having more flexibility, having more benefits, but also building long-term wealth because people have become owners. And so we're now able to look at that over the last 10, 12 years and say, hey, you know what, this is working. And we have data that shows that it's working. And we know now, maybe even more strongly than we did before, that ESOPs and co-ops and other forms of employee-owned companies, they're better companies. They are more resilient, and they do create wealth for their worker owners, and that matters.
Gotcha.
Thank you all. So what if I'm a small business owner and I want to go about, explore about the cooperative model? What would be the first thing that I should do?
Yeah, well, I think, we can all kind of chime in with an answer to that. But I think, depending on how you like to learn, there's so much out there. You can come to an event that our organizations are putting on and learn more about co-ops. There are so many resources, as we've shared, online where you can read about co-ops. You can read about other businesses that have done this and become co-ops. Or you can just pick up the phone or shoot an email and reach out to us, and we will kind of help you talk through it. I mean, sometimes people just want to be able to say, hey, this is my particular situation, and this is what I'm thinking about, and how would this work? And so we're happy to do that one-on-one with any business owner or anybody thinking about a co-op or any other type of employee-owned company. You can email us or call us anytime, and we're happy to have that kind of one-on-one exploration with you.
Does that vary for employee ownership?
So when I think what's it's a little bit different is when it's a conversion process. My first step is say, go talk to Amy, go talk to Ashley at Rocky Mountain Employee Ownership Center, because it is a different process if it's already an established business, as opposed to starting a worker cooperative from the beginning. And so, but I would say that some of the elements are very similar. For example, sharing about educating members on what it means to be a worker owner is definitely something that I would say is very similar for both, whether you're converting or starting from starting the business. They're, you know, in some aspects of developing the bylaws and all of the steps that are how you'll make decisions as a collective and how the business will operate. Some of those are very similar. I would say for us, what's a little bit different is that we also take a step back and look at the business model. We look at the value proposition and ensure that it is something that is needed and that it can benefit communities as well. And so some of the guidance includes for us, starting with groups, is not just about the cooperative aspect. And so it's also in parallel of the business aspect as well.
Thank you both. I believe Silvia wanted to mention another resource as well.
Yeah, and I'm going to cheat a little bit here because I would be remiss in not mentioning this, but Rise Denver, which stands for Denver's Rebuilding for an Inclusive and Sustainable Economy. That's the plan. That's what it's called. Rise Denver is going to focus on investments and those from the federal, state, government around 5 strategic areas and tactics to provide relief for businesses, workers, and communities. And because there are so many resources that have been coming down to Denver from the state and federal. And so I would be remiss again if I had not mentioned it. But what's interesting, and one of the pillars of those 5 strategic areas, bring back and enhance lost jobs, create new jobs, strengthen small business and nonprofit growth and resiliency, revitalize Denver's neighborhoods through targeted community support and placemaking, make it easier to do business with Denver. And the 5th one is accelerate public investment. But under that second pillar of strengthening business, small business and nonprofit growth and resilience is providing that toolkit and professional training on worker-owned businesses. So I think that is a piece of what, I don't know if that's what you guys are doing right now, Jessica, but I do see that it falls under the pillar. So I definitely needed to mention that. And we could pop that flyer in as well, Carla, for individuals who want to look at the one-pager.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I do see additional questions, and while our panelists answer them, I also will go back to the resources so that you can take a screenshot for some of the folks that have been asking here. So can you share common missteps, stumbling blocks, or unique challenges for entities or groups who are just starting to use this ownership structure?
Sure, I'll tackle that one a little bit. You know, like anything that's new and that we're learning, it's a process. And so we really coach businesses through kind of taking the time to set up the processes and the systems and to think through, you know, how are we, for us working with businesses that are transitioning, you know, for people to understand that you don't sort of become a co-op one day and then everything changes the next, right? And so it is a process that we work with folks on over often many months to, you know, on how will roles and responsibilities transition, kind of deep cooperative education about what will it mean to really be a member of a cooperative, and what does that look like, both in terms of, you know, how will things change if I'm a worker owner and I'm on the board of directors for my co-op, how might that be different than what I've done before, to, you know, what might change in the day-to-day and how we operate as a business. And so we really just try to help people understand that it is a process to go through that kind of a transition. And for some businesses, they already have a very cooperative culture. It feels like an easier transition. For some, there are going to be some stumbling blocks, but really being committed to working with each other and to building trust with each other is really important, as well as just kind of having those things in place, those kind of processes and policies that are going to help you have some structure to fall back on.
Yeah, I would say for startups, the common missteps is one of the things that we see often is that every member is so excited about making decisions that every member wants to make all of the decisions. And then they continue to grow, and then they realize that that's not necessarily, it's not maximizing productivity necessarily. And so it ends up, eventually they realize that maybe a board might be the best way to go. The other stumbling block that we see often, and now we start the training with, is financial overview. I think oftentimes the thought of open books and just having that oversight over financials can be really intimidating, especially for those who haven't necessarily had that before. And so as part of the training, we incorporate how to read financials. And not that people will actually be doing the books, but for any member to be able to understand and be able to ask questions to make sure that that fosters the trust needed for a cooperative to thrive. And then, yeah, what Amy mentioned in terms of the guidance and the coaching of how decisions will be made. And it really is, one of the things that's important to highlight is that it is about the process. This is not, I could come in with the model that has worked for cooperative X, that may not necessarily work for your cooperative. And so being very intentional about the decisions and how those decisions are made to ensure that it fits your cooperative is the best way to go. And that can be time consuming.
All right, thank you all. Sounds like we have time for just one more question. And the question, thank you, Jason, for asking questions. And then Jen, what size business is ideal for employee-owned businesses?
Well, for cooperatives, the minimum is 3. And so and that's just what's required. In terms of how big, as Amy mentioned, the Cooperative Home Care Associates in New York has over 2,000 employees. And so it can be really, really large, and it can be 3 people and everything else in between. Amy, would you want to share anything about employee stock ownership?
Yeah, so for ESOPs, there's a kind of a range of advice on that, but it does tend to be more appropriate for a larger business. You need to have at least 10 employees to set up an ESOP, but it's generally more advisable for 50 employees and up. And it's also really dependent on revenue and just kind of looking at what is your cash situation. And so, for an ESOP and a co-op transaction or transition, we will do a lot of kind of, financial assessment. What is the financial condition of the company, and how beneficial will it be to transition this to workers, and how well can the company support that? But, and then for kind of the different models, if you're looking at different kinds of profit sharing or stock options or stock granting, that can be done, with various sizes of companies. But again, it's really in those cases too, it's really going to be looking at the financials of the company more than necessarily the size.
Great, thank you. And I do also want to thank Jen, John, Tim, Mike for all of your questions. And I'm putting in, will you be sharing slides afterwards? Absolutely, we can definitely share slides. You can email any one of us, and our information is there. And for you to request any questions or slides. And I think we're at time. So thank you all so much. I'm so appreciative of your time. We definitely have had a fun time here with Denver Startup Week. And we do encourage you all to visit and see any additional sessions for this week. We're at the very end of the events. And so thank you all. Have a good rest of your day.
Carla, you did such an amazing job. Thank you for the facilitation.
You all really rocked this. I am so impressed. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you. It was great.
Still streaming?
Are we?
Are we?
think so. Few of us still on here.
Yes, we are.
Well, we can record our accolades.
Well, thank you everyone. Still, we can chat afterwards. It was really fun to do this together. So I'm hoping that we get the chat session too. So we'll be reaching out to the Denver Startup Week folks for that. And yeah, please do reach out if you have any questions. And for now, we're gonna go ahead and leave the video and the chat.
Thank you all. Have a great day.